Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi everybody. I'm going to do this live session on this Sunday afternoon. The idea is, inshallah, every weekend, hopefully I can dedicate a half an hour to address some of the questions that subscribers to BTV send in. They have to do some of them with Arabic, some of them with the Quran, some of them with life. And whatever I am able to answer, inshallah ta'ala, I'll try to do to the best of my ability. So I'm just going to open up the list of your questions. The way I'm going to format these sessions, inshallah, is that I'll probably try and do some of the, like half the time on Quran related questions and the other half, 10, maybe 15 minutes, inshallah, on just the Arabic related questions. Because I know not all of you are students of the Arabic language, so that may not apply to all of you, inshallah. So let's get started. Here are some questions that I want to start with. Pull in here. People nowadays have become more and more into dunya. We forget about the true destination and being busy with work, business, and entertainment. We even skip salah in early times and also other prayers. Do we have an example in the Quran regarding this problem? Maybe a prophet or persons or groups of people and so on. I personally need to know the strategies, how to deal with any distractions and obstacles on our journey to the akhirah. Hope you answer mine. Thank you. Okay, so Rifki from Indonesia sent this question. The thing I'd say is, I disagree with the way the question is formed. I don't like to think of nowadays there are more distractions. Dunya has always been distracting since its beginning, and there are different ways by which people get distracted. And just because nowadays we have technology to distract us, or social media, or whatever else, that doesn't mean that other distractions weren't there before. So I would actually think that commitment to salah and those core principles of our deen, when you're committed to them, then all these other distractions, they're always going to be there, and we can never get rid of them. We have to live our lives as believers despite them. We can't ignore them. We have to live with them. And so I don't know of a special strategy in the Quran to deal with that, but actually just you and I developing a realistic connection with the Quran. And by realistic, what I mean is that, dedicate a part of your day where at least you're going to make sure you're going to spend time contemplating Allah's book, doing some worship, consciously. Because salah, for a lot of us, becomes just an exercise, and we're not really consciously aware of what we're reciting. And that's okay. In the beginning, that's okay. You have to have some part of your day dedicated where you're thinking about the deen and Allah's words consciously. So even if it's 15, 20 minutes a day, you just separate some part of your day out, and inshallah that'll help a lot with our daily spirituality. Let's see, some Quran questions. Ustaz Nouman, Gog and Magog are mentioned thrice in the Quran. I know about Al-Kahf and Al-Anbiya, but where in Al-Hajj are they mentioned? I think I may have misspoken in some lecture. They're not mentioned in Surah Al-Hajj. They're only mentioned in Al-Kahf and Al-Anbiya, to my knowledge. Let's go to the next question. Surah An-Nisa and Surah Al-Imran. Jesus ﷺ was taken up with body and soul, or only soul? If only soul, then it means he died, right? Then how does the word shubbiha lahum relate to this, meaning it was made unclear to them? Is this the replacement theory, correct? Well, the thing about Isa ﷺ being raised is a very complex question in tafsir studies. What happened at the quote-unquote crucifixion of Jesus? Incidentally, I happen to be studying Surah Al-Imran right now, and we're in the series, and we talked about the crucifixion of Jesus for about 2.5 hours. So I think it's going to be rather unfair to give you like a 1-minute version of it, but I will say this: there are multiple ways of looking at what happened. At the end of all of them, what the Quran's text is making very clear is body and soul was raised, but how exactly that happened is a bit more complicated. I can put my camera down, but the mic will go under, so I don't know if it'll. It is a complex question, but I think a really interesting one. So inshallah ta'ala, if you watch the series on Ali Imran on Bayna TV, under the deeper look section, you'll get to these ayat, and inshallah that should benefit you with that particular curiosity. This is a question somebody asked about Surah Al-Hadid, ayah number 28. So let me pull it up first so I know what they're talking about. Hadid 28. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وآمنوا برسوله يؤتكم كفلين من رحمته ويجعل لكم نورا تمشون به ويغفر لكم والله غفور رحيم. Those of you who believe, have taqwa of Allah and believe in His Messenger, He will give you, as a result of your faith, He will give you two portions of His mercy, or you can think of it as twice His mercy, and He will put a light there for you and forgive you, and Allah is forgiving, merciful. And what's your question? Let's go to the question. There's a double reward for the people of the book who convert to Islam in Surah Al-Hadid. That's actually not correct, so that's already correct. Anyway, let's keep reading. But at the same time, there is no denial as well that if they die, don't convert, they shall be called kuffar. So there's a group of people who believe that Christians can remain Christians, and that Islam is not for them. I don't believe it, but this is one of the verses they use as evidence. Well, the ayah begins, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, first of all. And maybe the confusion is believers are being told to believe, so it must mean believers in Christianity believe in Islam. The ayah is not saying that. The ayah is actually, there are many ayat in the Quran that say, that call believers to truly believe. Like Allah says, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, aminu. Those of you who believe, believe. Like, that's mentioned. So, what's the difference then? How can you tell someone, those of you who believe, believe? It doesn't make sense. Like, if I said, hey, the one who's sitting down, sit down. Dude, I'm already sitting down. Hey, the one who's walking, walk. I'm already walking. One meaning of it is, those of you who believe, stay committed to your belief. The other meaning is, those of you who believe, in your head, now make sure your belief comes into your hearts. But there's a difference between those two. Just because you've claimed to believe, you don't have real faith yet. But the ayah wasn't talking directly to Christians. So the question is based on a false premise. But that's important. Like a lot of times I don't just answer questions, I'll criticize the question itself. So you see that it was framed incorrectly, inshallah. So sound quality is no good? I don't know what to do about that. I can speak louder or hold it closer. This is better? Here's a question about Surah Al-Baqarah. A really interesting question. Why in the order of the Quran, in the Mus'haf, did Allah decide to mention only some laws regarding society in Al-Baqarah? We read Surah Al-Baqarah cases, the laws of divorce, business, bequest, meaning inheritance, murder. What is the wisdom behind Allah only starting the kitab off with these laws rather than the laws regarding property and other crimes? Well, property is in fact mentioned. And some other crimes are mentioned, but actually the Quran is not a book of law. Fundamentally, it's a book of guidance, and the idea wasn't that society is going to need these laws to govern itself. When you frame the Quran as a book of laws, then you will say, yeah, the early surah only mentions some laws, so clearly something's missing and that's going to get mentioned later on. But actually we're framing the book in the incorrect way. The Quran contains law, but it's not a book of law per se. It's a book of guidance. And the guidance that society needed to be introduced to first and foremost in a very comprehensive way is actually the guidance of what's captured in Surah Al-Baqarah in a very powerful and comprehensive way. Since you've asked this question, I'd encourage you to go through the Baqarah series so you could see how comprehensive and all-inclusive it is. Surah Ibrahim, let's see. I have a question about the following ayah in Surah Al-Ankabut. وَلَمَّا جَاءَتْ رُسُولُنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ بِالْبُشْرَى قَالُوا إِنَّا مُهْلِكُوا أَهْلِ هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ إِنَّ أَهْلَهَا كَانُوا ظَالِمِينَ. Let me translate the ayah for you, the rest of you. When our messengers, meaning the angels, came to Abraham with good news, they said, we are going to destroy the people of this town because its people have been committing wrong. And the question is, isn't the destruction of a town something negative and a tragic thing? Or is it a case of sarcasm in the Quran? Well, actually, no. They came to Ibrahim with the good news that he's going to have a child. But he got curious, why are there three of you telling me that there's going to be a child? Well, Allah doesn't need to send me three angels to tell me there's just going to be a child. So he asked them, مَا خَطْبُكُمْ أَيُّهَا الْمُرْسَلُونَ? What are you really here for? Is there some other, is there some other agenda for which you came? And then Allah's angels told him that they're here to destroy this other nation. So there were two parts. One was the good news, and then later on was the warning. This is again an interesting literary question about the Quran. Regarding the story of Zakaria alayhi salam and how he's given glad tidings of a son, Allah says in Surah Ali Imran that his sign will be that he won't be able to speak to people for 3 days. Whereas in Surah Maryam, Allah says 3 nights. This difference intrigued me, and I wondered whether you knew why this was the case and what the wisdom is behind mentioning the signs differently. Yeah, this depends on context. It's important to note the way the Quran tells stories is not typical in how stories are told in general. What Allah will do is highlight one part of the conversation in one place, highlight a different part of the conversation in a different place. So you can think of it as the angels told him 3 days, or at another, in the course of the same conversation, remember 3 days, 3 nights. So both days and nights did get mentioned in the course of the conversation, but Allah highlighted one part of that conversation in Surah Al Imran, the days, and another part highlighted in Maryam, the nights. That raises the question, interestingly, why in the world would Allah Azza wa Jal separate those two? Like, why would He make 2 different indications, day versus night, for the same story? And the answer to that, as far as I've been able to understand, Allahu Alam, is that if the context, the larger passage of the surah has a certain theme and is making a certain point, then even the story and the way the story is phrased is impacted by the language surrounding it. Surah Al Imran is about bringing forward evidence, bringing things to light, making things clear. And so day is a more appropriate word in that context. And Surah Maryam begins with darkness, the darkness of the night, old age, loneliness, and there 3 nights are mentioned in the same context. So it's actually almost as though the environment in which the words are being described, the words are affected by that environment. Let me see. Ooh, you guys also asked Arabic questions. So cool. By the way, I'll look at your text questions. They're really distracting to look at, but I'm going to look at them at the end, inshallah, after the session's over. My question is, what are the options available for us to want to give the best possible Quran education? It is my dream to make my daughter a motivational speaker like you. Don't do that. Your motivation should not be to make your children a motivational speaker, or your dream. If our children come out good kids, they believe in Allah, they're fearful of Allah, they're mindful, they're principled kids, then you should be happy. Being a speaker is not any better than being a truck driver or being, earning a halal living, making bread, or whatever else. So don't think like that. I don't want anybody thinking like that. And your goal should not be to aspire to become like someone else. You should, allow your children to grow in the talent that Allah made them with. Don't mold them into something they're not. But I will say, as far as giving a good Quran education, I want to say a few things here. I met a parent not too long ago who told me he wants his child to be just like me, and it really bothered me. And he told me he wants his kid to be just like me. And I said, I don't even want my kids to be just like me. My kids are individual kids. They have their own personalities. They have their own priorities in life. Why do you want them to be like me? Why would I want that? I want some things that I have in my life, some principles I have in my life, or some gifts Allah has given me. I want to be able to give them those. But they have their own lives to lead. And he said, well, I'm making him memorize the Quran as a result. Well, does the child want to memorize the Quran? Is he happy memorizing the Quran? He even told me, that so you can't force religion onto children. It'll backfire. Deen has to be taught with love. Deen has to be taught with care, gently. And not every child will learn it the same way. Some of my kids don't like memorizing Quran so much. Some other kids are motivated enough, they're memorizing Quran on their own. So, you can't come with a predisposed plan for your children. So long as they're good kids and they're going to serve Allah's deen in some way that Allah enabled them, then that should be good enough, and not every kid has to be a hafiz. Not everybody has to be a speaker. Not everybody has to be on a stage. That's not the only way to serve Islam. Don't contain the contribution of your children and the next generation by doing that, So be merciful to your children, and don't, and certainly don't look at people like myself as oh, I want my child to be just like that. I don't think that's the right thing to do. I'm here to help. I'm here to try to study the Quran, study the Arabic language, study Allah's words, and understand them to the best of my ability, and share whatever I get to understand with you guys. But that doesn't make me any better than any of you. It doesn't make me like some kind of a leader or a role model or anything like that. It doesn't. It really, really doesn't. You know, there's lots of components to my life that are not on camera. That I have my personal life with my parents, my struggles, my children, you know, my family life. All of that stuff is not, you know, you don't just know some parts of a person's life and say, I want to be just like them. You shouldn't do that. So I pray that we don't impose on our kids what isn't fair, and that we allow them to grow and really become what Allah meant them to become. And you shouldn't even want them to be just like yourself, because Allah raised them in a different generation with a different society, you know, for a different time. So just allow them to grow in their own space. A geeky Arabic question. Cool. Thanks, Shazia Mirza. I have been doing grammar with Bayina and at Unit 3 at this time. My question is, what's the difference between aslama and sallama, allama and ta'allama and tata'allama? Okay. And anzala and nazzala. Thank you. Well, if you say aslama, which means to submit, sallama means to submit, but it's more emphatic. It can also mean that it's to submit over time. Or you could say that sallama is a much stronger word for submission than aslama is. Allama means to deliver information over time, which is also simply translated to teach. Ta'allama, with a ta in the beginning, is to learn. So it inflexes the verb, meaning the verb allama affects somebody else. Like when I teach someone else. Ta'allama is I'm learning, it's affecting myself. And then anzala and nazzala are similar. Anzala, you can argue, is to send down immediately, and nazzala to send down over time. But that may not be the only application. Anzala may be the normal usage of the verb, and nazzala may be the more emphatic usage of the verb, maybe more powerful usage of the verb. So both of those they can be interchangeable in some cases. So they don't always mean, anzala means sent down at once, and nazzala means sent down over time. Thanks for your question, Shazia. The Zafar asked an interesting question about word usage in the Quran. He says, I want to know the difference between the meaning of the word anfiqu, which means to spend. When does it mean spend for the sake of Allah, and when does it mean general spending? In the Quran, usually when Allah says spend, He means charity, and He means for the sake of Allah. So I don't know a case where Allah says anfiqu and He doesn't mean charity. Unless it's qualified. And context makes those things absolutely clear, Zafar. There's never a case where you're confused. What does He mean by spend? Does He want me to go buy new shoes? No, you're not going to be confused about that ever. Okay. Another interesting grammar question. In Arabic with Husna lectures, Ustad Nouman explains that partly flexible isms, what those of you that maybe know a little bit of Arabic know, they also call them mamnu' min as-sarf. They don't have kasra, they don't have tanween, correct. And I gave 4 examples of prophets that are Arab: Hud, Salih, Shu'aib, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes, they have tanween. And these 4 names are fully flexible. But in the Quran, there are non-Arab names that are also with tanween. For example, Nuh or Lut. Yeah, that's correct. So what that means for the rest of us is Arabic names can typically have a tanween at the end. So Muhammadun, Shu'aibun, you hear the un at the end. But then some names, if they're not Arab, like Yusuf is not from the Arabs, he's from the Israelites, so it's Yusufu. So you don't put a tanween on him. The exception to that is if a name is spelled with 3 letters with a sukoon in the middle, then it can become treated like an Arabic name again. So Nuhun, Nuhan, Nuhin, or Lutun, Lutan, Lutin, because they're 3 letters with a sukoon in the middle, and that's what makes them normal Arabic words again. So they become fully flexible in the language that I teach. Let's see. Good question. Hamdi asks, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَشْهَدُونَ الزُّورَ وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. What does lahu mean? When I looked it up, people said it was similar to the word lahu. And what does it mean to walk by it? Kiraman, to walk by it in a dignified way. It's a really good question, Z Hamdi. And that's from Surah Al-Furqan, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَشْهَدُونَ الزُّورَ. Let me translate the ayah for you. Those who don't witness falsehood or You can even say deviation. And when they pass by lahu, they pass by in a dignified way. The word lahu in Arabic, lagha is actually to speak of things that have no purpose, or to engage in activity that has no purpose. So useless talk, vain activity, people wasting time. When you find yourself in a gathering where there's no real purpose and people are just wasting time, and you happen to pass by, then you should keep going. In other words, you don't just say, hey, you people are wasting your time, astaghfirullah, I'm out of here. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَشُدُّونَ الزُّورَ وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. No, it actually means if I'm in a gathering where I'm noticing time's being wasted or useless conversation is going on and on and on, you find a dignified excuse to get out of that conversation. Marru kirama. In other words, you don't even hurt those people's feelings when you leave. So you honor yourself and you honor them as you leave. So you leave in a dignified way. And that's a very beautiful bit of advice that Allah gives. I got to tell you a funny story before I end this. True story. I used to study Quran in Queens, New York, with a small group of people. We'd get together in the masjid on Sunday afternoons. We'd study Quran. It was like 6 of us. And, it used to be 11 of us, and then 10, 9, 8. And eventually it's just 6 of us, right? And this new guy joined us. And we were so happy. Like, we have a 7th. This is amazing. So, and that week we happened to be studying this ayah. I'm reminded of the story because we were studying this ayah. And the way we used to do our circle is we used to, everybody studies the same ayah, and then we ask questions. And so the question was, what does the word lahu mean? That's the word from this ayah. وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. So, we asked, so what does lahu mean? And everybody's trying to raise their hand, answering questions. And the new guy, who came for the first time, raised his hand. And we're like, wow, this is easier for the first time? And he's raising his hand? This is awesome. So what is lahu? And of course, I just told you, lahu means useless talk, vain speech, pointless activity. And he raises his hand, and he goes, well, it's hard to explain. It's this warm feeling you feel inside, and once you have it, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And we're like, what is he talking about? He's like, yeah, it's the greatest gift. It's the sweetest pain ever. We're like, what? Lahu? And like, oh, no, bro, not love, lahu. So I was reminded of that from your question about the ayah, what is lahu? Barakallahu li wa lakum. Okay, let me take one more serious question, and inshallah ta'ala we'll call it a day. So I want to do this sort of casually. I don't want to make it into a super formal session. And let me tell you where I get these questions from, not from Facebook. These are questions taken from people that are subscribed to Bayyinah TV, they're studying Quran with me, and then they come across questions about Arabic or the Quran. And if you'd like to have your questions addressed this way, then jump on Bayyinah.tv. If you can afford it, well, good for you. If you can't, then you can just click on gift and get a free subscription. So yeah, that was pretty funny. Let's see. That's a good question. In the second ayah of Surah Ibrahim, what caught my attention is that the lafzul jalala is majroor. I would like to know what are your thoughts as to how it is connected to the previous ayah, and what depth of meaning does that give? I see it as majroor is because of ila from the previous ayah, or is acting on, or is a mudaf ilayh for sirat. Okay. Let's open it up, inshallah. We open up the ayah and explain that to everybody. So inshallah, it'll be of something of benefit before we leave. Surah Ibrahim is not a surah I've studied in depth yet. I've studied it, but not to the depth that I'd like to. But I do believe I remember a lesson or two about the opening ayat that you asked about. So I'll share that with you. Alif Lam Ra Kitabun Anzalnahu Ilayka. Alif Lam Ra, a book that we have sent down to you. لِتُخْرِجَ النَّاسَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. So you may bring people out from darknesses into light. بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِمْ, by the permission of their master. إِلَى صِرَاطِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ, by the permission of their master, to the path of the ultimate authority, the wise. Allahi, the next ayah begins, Allahi. The question was, the word Allah has a kasra on it, has E on it. And Allahi alladhi lahu ma fi samawati wa ma fi al-ardi wa wailu lil kafirina min adhabin shadid. The word Allah is majroor, And because it's majroor, it's directly connected to the previous ayah. What's the benefit of starting an ayah with the majroor? Why not just keep it as one ayah also? The word Allah here clearly is a separation from the previous because it's a separate ayah. But it also does something. The rhetorical sort of theme of the ayah is Allah bringing people out of darkness towards light. And notice there's an ambiguity towards clarity in the ayat. Who is their master? Who is the ultimate authority? Who is Al-Hamid? And that ambiguity is clarified by the word Allah in the next ayah. So literally, the ayat get increase in the light and they reach the ultimate light when they get to the word Allah Himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ila sirat al-aziz al-hamid Allah. So it's actually the climax of light when we get to arrive at the conclusion, Allah Himself, subhanallah. And it's from a rhetorical and literary point of view, what's also really beautiful about this ayah is it started with light and it ended with kafirin, disbelievers. And kafir literally means someone who buries something into the darkness, buries something deep inside. So subhanallah, it's a really beautiful literary imagery that's captured inside these ayat. So that's it. That's our little brief Sunday question answer session. Thank you for your questions. I'm looking forward to more questions from you, and I pray that you guys, at your own pace, engage in a study of Allah's book and contemplation, and ask questions about what you read in the Quran. May Allah increase your knowledge of the Quran, your commitment to the Quran, and bring light of the Quran into all of your lives and my life, and the lives of our children, and the lives of our families. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.